I wish I could be there to introduce President Saakashvili in person, but as I suspect John may have told you, I'm in Egypt right now to witness the latest milestone of the Reagan legacy. Today, the Egyptian people begin their first true presidential election in 7,000 years. I hope that my friend, as a fellow proponent of Reagan's vision of liberty across the globe, will forgive my absence. Building a democracy in a region that has been hostile to the will of the people is a concept with which Mikheil Saakashvili is very familiar. There's a reason that Vladimir Putin considers him to be public enemy number one. Under President Saakashvili's leadership, the Republic of Georgia was one of the first Soviet republics to make a clean break with the past. Since the Rose Revolution in 2003, Georgia has forged ahead, implementing the vibrant democracy and free markets that President Reagan envisioned 3 decades ago. The difficulty of truly realizing the goals of a democratic revolution is only highlighted by Georgia's fellow Soviet republics. Ukraine has yet to see the promise of its Orange Revolution. Kyrgyzstan shows great potential, though only after the Tulip Revolution was reprised. Actually, of all the color revolutions of the last decade, no country has done more to advance the Reagan agenda than the Republic of Georgia. This achievement is perhaps best symbolized by the presence in Tbilisi of the only statue of Ronald Reagan in the former Soviet Union. John Haibush and I had the privilege of joining President Saakashvili to dedicate this statue last November. When we arrived for the unveiling, we had just come from a similar ceremony in Warsaw with Lech Walesa. The statue commissioned in Poland depicted a very authoritative-looking Reagan, very appropriate for the man who called on Mr. Gorbachev to tear down the Berlin Wall. But the Reagan statue commissioned by Misha is unique and is perhaps my favorite. In the Georgian depiction of our 40th president, Ronald Reagan sits on a park bench near the banks of the Kura River where anyone can sit down right next to him and have a chat. Perhaps it was this sense of the familiar that led Misha to join a tremendous project by the accomplished artist David Ashwell, who's also there with you tonight. David, whose stunning artwork is displayed in the U.S. Capitol, conceived of a project to benefit Save the Children called Yesterday's Children. He's painted dozens of portraits of prominent leaders in different fields, all based on photographs of them as children. His subjects have included George Shultz, Condi Rice, Elaine Chao, and of course, Ronald Reagan. But Misha's portrait, which is there on display tonight, stands out for showing the world that even at the age of 5, he looked unmistakably presidential. I know that our Georgian friend will receive a tremendous welcome at the Reagan Library, but I warn you, this is a man with incredibly high standards of hospitality. When I made plans to visit Georgia for the statue unveiling, President Saakashvili insisted on hosting us for Thanksgiving dinner. His trusted aide asked me what Americans do on Thanksgiving, and I explained that we mostly just eat and eat and eat. To which he replied, "With Mikheil Saakashvili, every day is Thanksgiving." True to form, he hosted us with what I believe was the first meal of roast turkey, stuffing, and mashed potatoes ever served in Tbilisi. But that was only the beginning. The next day, we traveled out to his country home for the real feast of shashlik, hachipuri, and cha-cha. I'll let the president explain cha-cha to you, but just a little hint, Georgian cha-cha doesn't start out as a dance. Misha, until we meet again for our next Georgian feast, welcome to California and the Reagan Library. You were one of the first Reagan revolutionaries of the 21st century, and I can think of no one more fitting to address this crowd. The floor is yours.
The Consul General from Azerbaijan, Afghanistan, Armenia, Bangladesh, Bulgaria, Ecuador, France, Georgia, Hungary, Kenya, Malaysia, Poland, and the Philippines. Thank you all so much for coming. I'd also like to welcome our Ventura County Supervisor, Peter Foy. Peter, are you here? And our Ventura County Sheriff, Jeff Dean. Jeff. Finally, I'd like to extend a special thanks to the Honorable Frank Greinke and SC Fuels for making our reception later this evening possible. Frank, are you there? Well, tonight is a special night for the Reagan Library. We have received visits here before from foreign dignitaries and heads of state, and it's always an honor to welcome them. This one is particularly important. It's an important occasion because we have with us a leader in the mold of Ronald Reagan. Someone who, like our 40th president, has dedicated much of his life to the cause of freedom and democracy in a region of the world where such treasure is not won easily. We also have with us in that same leader a man who, within the shadow of the former Soviet Union, recently honored President Reagan. During 2011, the centennial year of President Reagan's birth, he erected a statue of President Reagan in his capital city of Tbilisi as a reminder of the importance of preserving freedom for future generations both in his own country and around the world. Mr. President, on behalf of Mrs. Reagan and our Board of Trustees, thank you for the honor you have bestowed upon President Reagan, and thank you for your lifelong courage in the defense of freedom. Now, we have been looking forward to President Saakashvili's visit here for some time, as have many others. Chief among them who deserve credit for his visit here is a great friend of the Reagan Library, Congressman David Dreyer. Unfortunately, he was called away at the last minute for a very important mission as a U.S. observer to the first presidential election in Egypt since the 2011 revolution, an election that is literally taking place today. Many of you know David. If you have a friend, a family member, or someone you know living in a foreign country where its emerging democracy is struggling to bring its people a future of promise, freedom, and liberty, you can rest assured they have had a helping hand from David. His work as the founder and chairman of the House Democracy Partnership in Congress and as a longtime board member of the International Republican Institute in this critical mission is unmatched. So, through the miracle of modern technology, he's joining us today to provide the formal introduction of our special guest. Ladies and gentlemen, Congressman David Dreyer.
I came here today to you to share with you my optimism. It can look strange coming from a leader whose country is partially occupied by a country 100 times bigger than that of his own. Is under the country that's under existential threat, the country against whom there are daily provocations. My optimism about the triumph of freedom, about the American leadership in the world, about the future of NATO and the future inside NATO of my own country, Georgia. This optimism was one of the most important characteristics of Ronald Reagan as a man, as a political leader, as a president. I always recall when I have doubts in my mind about uncertain things, his inauguration speech on January 20th, 1981. The whole world was speaking about the American decline back then. A tsunami of pessimism had overwhelmed the West in the preceding decade. The USSR looked almighty, and the economy here looked hopeless. We would be shown on Soviet television local lines of gas in the US metro station, and they were, at that time it wasn't fake, it was really happening as we know. And here, in the message Ronald Reagan delivered to the world, we have every right to have dream heroic dreams. Those who say we are not in a time there where there are heroes, they just don't know where to look at. Georgia has become more than a country. In our region, it is an idea. For our troubled but fragile region, the surprising survival and the shining success of Georgia's democratic experience is a message of hope for everybody around us. For a long time, people thought in the post-Soviet space that there are only two choices. One, massive so-called democracy, like they had in the 90s in Russia, with certain freedom of word, even if journalists were slaughtered and killed, but still there was freedom of word, freedom of assembly, huge corruption, crime rate, declining standards of life, or the other alternative was what later Vladimir Putin brought to Russia, authoritarian rule, regulated corruption, or he didn't eliminate it, but regulated it, putting under control crime, criminal structures, corrupt structures, everything just now under control, checked by the supreme authority. It cannot be corrupt on your own or criminal on your own. You have to also serve the supreme goal. And Georgia has shown that, but in fact, this regulated stuff seemed more orderly to some people who were tired of unregulated ones, so they basically fought it for some time. Georgia showed that there is a third path, the path of democratic values. Of course, this brings the highest dangers on us, because we are challenging the very basis of Russian regime and domination in the region. But we have an important ally, the United States of America. Without President Bush and President Obama's defense of our independence, I will not be here to address you today. In an address to the nation, Reagan said in 1984, history teaches that wars begin while hostile government believes the price of aggression is cheap. The alliance with the US based on common values and shared principles is the keystone of our foreign policy. It is more than that, more than a diplomatic choice or national security issue. It is a choice of values, choice of society, choice of life. For those who are on the front line of fights for democratic values, there cannot be such thing, there is no such thing as an American decline. From the Arab world to the post-Soviet space, from Asia to Europe, people are still looking at you, at your nation, as the pivotal force in the world for freedom and good. This is not a matter of democratic or Republican administration. This goes beyond economic downturn or moral crisis. This is the very essence of American role in the world. Americans' best days are yet to come, and our glorious achievements are just ahead, as Reagan said. Ronald Reagan had at the same time a resolute future in the future, faith in the future, an absolute optimism, in the sense that history would never come to an end, that it would always remain, that it would not always remain tragic. Let me quote him once again. Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We do not pass it to our children in the bloodstream. It must be fought for, protected, and handed for them to do the same. These words resonate in Georgia more than anywhere else. We know how precious freedom is and how fragile at the same time. We know what it means to be deprived of it, and we know what it means to fight for it. Freedom is everything. It is at the same time the sun and is making things grow, and the light that allows us to see them. Nothing has value without freedom. Nothing exists, in fact, without freedom. Already in 1952, Reagan gave the true meaning of American predominance in the world. America is less of a place than an idea that has been deep in the souls of man. And certainly, this great idea that is deep in the souls of man, this is all about freedom. And that's what we are trying to protect and develop in Georgia of today. Thank you.